make that go away? Okay, we're just going to live with the taskbar. Hey everybody, I'm Sean M. Tracey. I'm the head of developer relations at a company called Expanso, and that was the wrong slide to show you. But yeah, so we are the developers and maintainers of an open source project called Bacalhau. It's Portuguese for cod, and it is a distributed workload orchestrator. The fun thing about having a product name in Portuguese when none of you speak Portuguese natively is we all butcher the name. So is there a right way of saying it? Absolutely. Are we able to do it? No, we're not. But it stands for COD, and we'll talk more about that later on. But first, a history lesson. It's actually kind of, I think, almost, what's the word, serendipitous that both Lou and I are speaking about the year 1981 this evening. But yeah, forgive me. Something I want to talk to you about today is that the web. The web is not experienced the same way by everybody. For many of us, the web is this rich tapestry of images and videos and dynamic typography, just kind of flying around pixels on whichever device you happen to have, the ones in your pockets, the ones in your homes, the ones on your desks. And it's no wonder that with such interesting and varied content that the web kind of took over the world in the last 30 years. I can't actually think about the last time I sat down to watch terrestrial television, despite it consuming most of the 90s for me. But for others, the web isn't so much of a visual medium. Specifically those who may have a visual impairment, the web is interpreted instead through a whole host of accessible technologies, most notably screen readers, which take the content that you and I take for granted and can just kind of see and interpret and understand, and reinterprets it in a way that makes it more understandable for those who don't have vision in the same way. And this is great for a whole bunch of uses. When you have text on the website, a screen reader will go through it. It will list out all of the elements on there. It will help you see what's there in a different kind of way. And as far as computers go, this is a fairly simple challenge, like reading aloud what's on the screen. We've had text-to-speech technology since the early 80s, about 1981 actually. And there have been some notable users of such technology. This is Dennis H. Klatt. I guarantee you've heard this man's voice, even if you didn't know it. Does anyone know what he's most notably remembered for? No. Oh, good guess, though. Good guess. Think Brainiac Clock. This is the man who created the voice box that Stephen Hawking used. So he made one of the first speech-to-text systems back in the early 80s as part of the research project. And his voice laid down the foundations for what was the voice in Stephen Hawking's voice in a piece of hardware called the Deck Talk. Interesting thing about Stephen Hawking's voice box is it never really changed. But when you run the same box for nearly 40 years, that thing starts to get troubling. Hawkins was particularly picky about how he sounded afterwards. It was hard enough that he lost one voice, let alone losing his new voice, which he began to identify with. And it was Dennis's voice. In the last few months of his life, Hawking's box was getting really quite rickety, so they worked quite hard to create a software emulator for the hardware that could run on a Raspberry Pi. So at the end, Stephen Hawking's voice ran on a Raspberry Pi, which was emulating the same device that Dennis Klatt put together 40 years before, which is just a nice little segue. I myself have a fair amount of experience working with text-to-speech systems, going way back to 2015 when I was in my 20s and optimistic about life. Now I'm in my 30s and, I'm alive for now. And, I use some of the more modern AI-enabled text-to-speech systems, which had a more kind of organic sort of voice. And we use that to make an automatic version of the Financial Times that you could listen to rather than have to read. We built that because when Boris Johnson announced his leadership race, I was both outraged and surprised. And on Waterloo Bridge, you can't read a newspaper when you're walking across Waterloo Bridge during the lunch hour. It's just too many people, but you can listen to it. And you can listen to it on the tube. The FT is huge, but my ears are small. One of my best qualities according to my grandmother. Don't read too much into that. But yes, so there's a whole way of using things. And because text-to-speech systems aren't that complicated, really. You take text from an input source, could be a website, could be a book, could be anything that's in a computer. And you generate some reasonably understandable speech. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to sound like you and I. Intonation is a flair, not a necessity. And that's not difficult because there's only a certain number of phonemes in a given language, the bits that make up the sounds that make up words. And there's only a certain number of ways that these things can be combined, right? So, bucket, all those kind of things. So without too much work, you can have something that sounds decently interpretable, without having something that's hugely complex or needs to have a full knowledge of the millions and millions of words and varieties, derivations of words in something like English. But the web is more than just text. As I said, at the top of this presentation, it's a smorgasbord, yeah, a bit of color in there, of rich visual content. But to a computer, they don't see things the way that you and I do. We see colors and highlights and tones and darkness and brightness, shapes and edges. But it's a beautiful vista. But a computer sees this. It's just an array of color values in given channels that are defined within a certain set of boundaries and then being rendered out there to become an image that we can see and interpret. So this could be of a sky, this could be of a cat, this could be the beginning of some random numbers that I put into for a presentation. I don't know, the screen reader certainly doesn't, and I'm looking at it right now. And so that's a much harder problem. Breaking up words into the component parts and devising which sounds should make up those parts is a smaller problem than trying to describe all of the elements that can make up creation. And so the difficulty of that challenge can lock people out from utilizing the web in the fullest and most active way, which isn't fair. And this isn't a new problem. It's one that people have been trying to tackle for a very, very long time. Back in 1993, so a bit more current, but still 32 years ago, there was a draft spec of HTML 1.2. Which enabled developers to use something called an alt tag, which would enable you to put a description of an image, because there were images back then, there was no canvas, there was no video tag, but enable you to put a description of what an image was there so that if there was some screen reading technology, it would be able to utilize this rather than have just kind of blank space as far as the user is concerned, or have some fallback content if the image didn't load. So you've got a sense of what's going on in there. And it's been a part of the web since almost the very beginning, right at the very beginning. And that tag has worked its way through the vast majority of websites, applications, and platforms on the internet ever since. But it's not always utilized. And it's hard to know why people don't use these sort of things. It could be that people just aren't aware of the benefits and the utility of the alt tags. It could be that people just can't be bothered. It could be something in between or a mix of both or whatever. But the important thing here is that it is incredibly useful. And I think the why of people don't utilize these things doesn't necessarily matter too much. The really question should be, how can we encourage people to describe their images and their content so that the most people as possible can benefit from and appreciate them? And for us at Expanso, the question is, well, how can we help do that? The world hasn't remained static in the last 30 years. There have been huge leaps in computational power, drops in prices for that power, and software that enables us to do things now that even like a decade ago would have seemed incredibly infeasible. I mean, Lou's demo earlier on is kind of, I felt like I watched Doug Engelbart doing the mother of all demos like for the 21st century. It's kind of crazy, right? But that was the sort of thing that, again, 10, 15 years ago was completely fanciful and high thinking stuff. But the last couple of years have been interesting. There's been a big burst onto the scene of large language models, brought to us in the first instance, everyone kind of noticed them by OpenAI with ChatGPT. And LLMs are really quite an incredible piece of technology. When you think back to what a chatbot was like 10 years ago in 2015, it was, maybe you'd interact with it in Slack and you'd say, what temperature is it outside? And it would have some very defined boundaries of like, I think this is the kind of question that I'm being asked, so this might match up. And it would say, oh, what temperature is outside? The temperature is Turkey. Because it didn't have any sort of decent intelligence or understanding of what was actually said there, but it wasn't quite for it. LLMs enable us to have much more natural interactions with conversation, with human language. They're able to take an input, get a sense of the context, and then reinterpret that in some way and give us something meaningful back, as we just saw earlier. And boundless applications, but still text in, text down. Right? Wouldn't it be great if we could take visual elements and put them into an LLM and interpret them in some way that an LLM would have those pixel values that we saw earlier on broken down and interpreted so we could ask questions of it. So we could say to the LLM, hey, I'm looking at this, go and do these things here to it. That's kind of the next big step. And that's something that one of the things you can apply is one technology you can use is a large vision model. You have the large language model. There are also large vision models. And they're not greatly different in their construction to something like DeepSeek or Llama. They're still fundamentally LLMs. But they have a little component that sits in front called a visual encoder, which takes those images, breaks them down into vectors, basically, that allows the LLM to understand them. And so it kind of gives the LLM a capability of, for lack of a better term, seeing what you're talking about. It can get a sense of elements in a picture, how they relate to one another. And then you as a person utilizing an LLM can describe or interact with that content you've just seen there. So we've kind of souped up almost and given LLMs an extra ability. And that means that suddenly you have a model which allows us to answer questions about visual elements. And that's great. And if you want to run like an LVM locally, there are things like Llama, which if you haven't tried it out, you want to run local, like large language anything or large anything locally, then go and check Llama out. Really simple piece of kit, which you just download, pull the models. They're big. So, network charges may apply. Don't do it on your mobile phone. But yeah, it enables you to pull them down, run them locally. But if you're going to try and build something that you want other people to go and do, it's not necessarily the most straightforward thing in the world. Getting a large language model or a convolution neural network or any kind of machine learning model up onto a server for many people to use can be a pain in the backside. There's different kinds of dependencies, different kind of hardware requirements, getting access to the systems you want to run these things on, getting them for the kind of price which makes them doable. That's a pain in the backside, but that's something that Expanso, we're really rather good at, and that's because we have this open source project I mentioned earlier called Bacalhau. Now, yeah, it's very clever, it's very cool, and it has a ton of very neat features, but there's one thing it does very, very well. It takes your workloads and puts them where you want to run them. And it doesn't care what kind of work that it is. It can be a Python script, it can be a large language model, can be, flash animation of a chicken running up some stairs. Doesn't really matter, right? Bacalhau will take it from A and get it to B and lets you run that with the hardware that you want to run it on quickly and securely. And, deploying an LVM is as simple as a single CLI command, which is something that we're going to do. And we do it with something called compute over data. So Bacalhau is Portuguese for cod. So the name is a pun in another language. Compute over data. When you think of traditional infrastructure and how systems typically work these days, you tend to have a whole array of users or devices or systems that are generating data. And then that data is taken somewhere, be it logs or user interactions or just images that you want to crunch and understand in some sort of way. They move to a central data store somewhere, generally speaking, where they are then processed later on by either some big computer that you have, or in part because you have some application you want to run these certain things on. And that's great when you're starting out. I have built every application I've ever built in that way, starting first. But as that application scales, that gets quite hard, quite slow, quite expensive. If you're running megabytes through a system, fine. You're running terabytes through a system, there are egress fees, there is computational fees, there are storage fees. Bit of a pain in the ass. So one of the things that we've done differently is said, well, what if you can keep that data where it is? What if you can keep that data on those systems and instead push your workload to where the information is there? Run it on those systems that already have that data in place. So instead of moving gigabytes, terabytes, or petabytes around through the system, you can move megabytes of application code to those systems and get back those results as though they had been from a central location. That's what Bacalhau does. And yeah, it's fast, it's cheap, and it's super easy to deploy ML workloads with. So even if you don't have data at the edge, you still have edge locations that have computational power you want to utilize. Super handy at being able to do that. And so, to prove that, a few months ago, we launched something we called the Bacalhau Bluesky bot. It's a bot account that would allow you to deploy arbitrary workloads. So if you have the Bacalhau CLI for interacting with your compute somewhere in the world, you would normally just go Bacalhau job run and then say a YAML file which would describe an application you wanted to run it there. I was like, well, Bluesky has an API. We can abstract that out to an account. So instead of running these things on your system, you can run them via a Bluesky account to run them on our network of available compute, which is good fun. And it was more just kind of an educational piece of, we like Bluesky, we like it because it's open, we like it because we have interesting conversations there, we like it because we can interact with the system and show off, actually, distributed computing doesn't have to be this very hard, technical, complicated thing. I have so many diagrams I could show you, but I'm not going to because, there's a lot and it's a lightning talk, right? So it's just going to show you the thing. But yeah, essentially it would take that job. This was a hello world. It would give me my results. Nice and simple. Couldn't be simpler. And while we're on that, while we're showing this off to people, we were, having conversations. People do that in social media. And there are a ton of images on Bluesky, we noticed, but not all of them have alt text. And quite a lot of people don't like when there's not alt text. It's a responsibility as far as most people are concerned, and that's quite right, in my opinion. So we kind of sat back and we had a little think, as we want to do. And we're really good at building and shipping ML applications. We have a whole bunch of compute just kind of sitting there waiting to be utilized. And we have this natty little all that English colloquialisms this evening. With this natty little Bacalhau bot just kind of sitting there on Bluesky waiting for kind of generic workflows. We thought, well, what if we had something a bit more specific? What if we had something that was a little bit more kind of targeted and perhaps even useful, had utility for people? And so yesterday, we launched the Bacalhau alt text bot. Again, this lightning talk was, I think we agreed it 6 hours ago. I saw Hugh had put on LinkedIn that we have a lightning slot. I was like, I launched this thing 20 minutes ago. I can demo that, sure. Time will tell. Yeah, essentially, what we have is a Bacalhau network, which has Lava, which is LLAVA, which is a large vision model sitting on our network. And whenever someone posts to the Bacalhau alt text bot, mileage may vary, it will take that image, send it off to our network and say, hey, what's in here? And it will generate some alt text and reply to the account with that alt text there. And we thought we'd run it through some examples. So this is me mother and me sister enjoying a lovely pint of Guinness in Dublin. And they were mortified to know they're on a TV quite so large in front of so many people, but that's why they're here. But this image shows two individuals holding glasses of beer. Guinness is technically beer. And raising them in a toast. Great, quite right. They are standing in what appears to be a bar or restaurant setting. Yes. And both are smiling, seem to be enjoying themselves. Quite right, they'd had 2 pints at that point. But that was without a prompt. This is just the LVM at its basic level. We aren't saying to it, hey, this is the scene, hey, here's the thread. We're saying, what's in this image? So already it has an awareness of what's going on there. It's better than having nothing. Better than having nothing, which is kind of cool. And we've had some surprising results. This is a user submitted this image, and not only did it describe the scene quite well, it got the name of the thing. Somewhere in that LVM is an awareness that this is Matera, a picturesque view of the village of Matera in Italy, which is known for its sassy cave dwellings and is UNESCO World Heritage Site. So it's given some information there too. If there's a picture of Matera, then it's probably worth explaining what it's about. The landscape is lush and green, with terrace fields typical of the Italian countryside. I'd say, for an LVM out of the box, that is fairly good. And then finally, we thought we'd throw something a little bit interesting into it. I went to a party last weekend and I made a hat for it. I went to a cyberpunk party, a good friend of mine's house, and we got some good pictures in the garden. In this image, there is a man standing on a staircase at night. True. He appears to be wearing a black top hat. Yes. Now, to be fair, there are not many top hats with LEDs in them, so while it is an important feature of that image, I'm not surprised that it wasn't picked out. It could have said that my head was on fire, but it was like, what, we're going to be rational, we're going to be sensible. It's definitely a black top hat. Has a beard and a moustache. Yes, I do. The man's holding a small handheld device, possibly a smartphone or a similar gadget. Now, it is, in fact, a glass of whiskey. So it got that wrong. So it does still make some assumptions and presumptions about people and what they're doing and the context that they're in. In fact, this is not the entire description that Lava will output. You put things in there. It tends to do about 2 or 3 paragraphs where it tends to kind of justify itself. But you can only do, I think, 200 characters on Bluesky. So we cut those down. We say if it's going to be more than the limit, then we're going to just kind of pause that there and do it later on. But, these are kind of some of the examples. But it's not a true lightning talk without a little bit of a demo. Yeah, we've got time. Excellent. Cool. So if I exit this presentation, and I have the bot loaded up here, well, people are actively using it. That's good. Huzzah. Well, let's have a look. Let's see, does it work? So people have been using this in ways we didn't expect. So originally, it was meant as a kind of like assistive bot, where people could put an image online and someone could see they didn't have alt text, say, hey, I want help with this image, and it was kind of at us, and we would go and do that for them. But people seem to be using it to actively ask for alt text as they're posting it. They want to be able to quote things, and they want to be able to upload images and get an alt text in response from the actual alt text box. So I have work to do when I get home. Again, we launched this 13 hours ago. It's still very fresh. And honestly, I'm not surprised it's still up. We have very good software, but I'm kind of surprised it's still up. No one's really maxed it out yet. So yeah, let's see what this person asked for. So they asked for some text. Now this is an interesting one. People would like to know that there is text in this image, but the prompt we have for the large model is briefly describe this image. So what you tend to get from it is a description. Oh, it's some text on some white paper, maybe a newspaper clipping. And let's see if it actually responded to that. Hang on. Threading is slightly broken today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat around a little bit. Yeah. Oh, to be fair, so the image shows a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Not in Alberta." Below the headline is an article discussing the proposed new state on Fort Smith Island, which is currently located within Alaska. So whether that's correct or not, I can't remember. But let's have a quick little look. And yeah, okay, that's largely correct. But I think in that case, that person wants more traditional OCR, which again, these models can do. I haven't asked for that. So there's some work to be doing about determining like what kind of content we want, what kind of images there, and maybe some user modes even of like, hey, give me alt text versus hey, give me some OCR or something like that. But again, yeah, let's try something else. So I'm going to upload an image from my personal collection. I haven't loaded any up. Do a selfie. I think that was pretty good earlier on. Yeah, let's. This is a new phone. I don't actually know how to use it yet. Here we go. Right. Terrifying. Excellent. There you go. Yeah. Whenever I send my partner pictures, the response I usually get from her is Christ. So it's like, I'm glad she loves me. Because I must be scary. So hang on, let's put these on Bluesky. I'm very aware that as far as user participation goes, this is not the most engaging thing right now. Please do feel free to add the Bluesky bot in a second. So let's add that. Let's upload that. I'm not going to add any alt text. I'm going to be a bad actor here, and I'm going to be a little bit neglectful, but it's to prove a point. It's in the pursuit of goodness and science, so it's okay. And that's going to be up any second now. So if I now say to at alt text Bacalhau bot, text. It's hard typing with a microphone. There we go. So I'm going to reply to that. And essentially what we're doing on the back end there is we have an application which is just polling the Bluesky API every 10 seconds saying, hey, do we have notifications? If there are notifications because we've been added, then we go through those and we say, okay, great, we've got something we want to work through now. And I should have that in there. I've got it right. Good. So we fired that off, right? So that's, yeah. Sorry, audience. I don't know how to do a picturesque look. But then the bot then goes, okay, cool. I have this image now. I need to do something with it. I know that in this instance, because I am the alt text box, I'm going to generate alt text for it. Takes that, wraps it up in a YAML file, which I'll show you shortly, and then fires it off to the Bacalhau network that we set up. So we run it through a managed orchestrator called Expansive Cloud. I can show you that in a bit if you like. But essentially sends it says, hey, you have compute available to you. I know that some of you have GPUs. When you have availability, please go and run this model for me. And when you get the results, send them back so I can do something with it. It fires it off. The job executes on one of the many nodes that we have connected to these things. The results happen, and then we should be good to go. I have a notification on my personal Bluesky account. So let's see if it's correct. Okay, yeah, we can put that on screen. Hurrah! You can never be sure. You can never be certain. Hang on. So let's have a look. Oh, hey, there we go. So that's the thing. So this is what we're saying. You've done it wrong. So this is where it's not built right now for asking things directly for it. You have to reply to yourself, essentially. So I have asked it. I've put the picture up there, and I said, hey, go and tag this for me, right? But we'll fix that. That'll be a new feature. But when it was used, the image shows a person giving a presentation or speech, debatable, but not important. Standing in front of the screen, it displays a social media interface. It was showing Bluesky in the background at the time. On the screen, there's a post with text image, which appears to be a screenshot from a story on Instagram. It's presumed a little bit there at the end, but you do get a sense of the scene. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the demo. You know what I'm going to do though? I'm going to fire this up. Hang on. So I can't do it for so the Bacalhau bot doesn't respond to itself, right? Because then you just get this endless loop. But what I can do is respond to you, Lou, with my personal Bluesky account. Hang on. Did it? Yeah. Oh, excellent. Okay, there we go. Right, real-time stuff here. Hang on. hang on. Now, hang on. What did it say? What did it say? What did it say? So, yeah. Give it a sec. When did you put that up? Just now. Oh, okay. It has or hasn't. And yeah, this is something that's made testing quite hard. But because oh, here we go. The image shows a person with long hair looking to the side with their tongue sticking out. Yes. They are wearing a red and black striped shirt. Yes. The person is indoors. There's natural light coming from the windows. It's nighttime. It's not quite right, but hey, 4 out of 5 ain't bad, you know? Coming through windows that are not visible in the image. So it's misinterpreted lighting there. But again, better than an empty void people can't engage with. And this is an off-the-shelf model. We've done literally nothing to augment this at all, other than ask what's in this image. So yeah, some resources for you all. If you want to play with Lava to generate alt text, I've built a CLI utility called Alt Lava. It's on GitHub. This is actually exactly what we ship to the Bacalhau network. So we say, hey, there is this container, right? It expects these parameters. Please go and run it on the available compute. So I can run this code on my laptop and it will work. Or I can container it up and say, hey, go find me a GPU instance somewhere on the network and go and do it. And it will just make that happen. It actually takes about 3 seconds to spin up the Llama server inside the container. And it does the classification in like 500 milliseconds, which is pretty great. So this thing can already run quite comfortably at scale on a quite not powerful GPU that we have hooked up in those networks. We're not burning through thousands of dollars of cash here. You know, we're talking like on the scale of hundreds for quite a minimal thing. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I do have some other resources for you all. As I say, this was a lightning talk. Oh God, they're so bright. But yeah, if you want to find the code for the alt text bot, then please find it there. If you want to find the code that runs the Bacalhau bots, because there's only one code base. And if you want to find out more about these things, we actually wrote a blog about it yesterday, which will help you with these things. So I appreciate that the AI in your phones is currently searching for QR codes, may struggle to have 3 at one time, but hey, this is a work in progress. You know, that's what we do in the technology sector. Yeah, I've been Tracey, and thank you.